What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So a lot of people were a little bit confused with why Riot decided to remove Smite Rewards from the game a while back, since they potentially gave some meaningful choices to junglers and removing them could be seen as potentially simplifying the role. And so Riot actually addressed this topic with a dev post, so I wanted to kind of take a look at their explanation and see what we could potentially have in store for us as a replacement in the future. This video is sponsored by RapidX Gaming Chairs. They work to bring you guys the best and the highest quality gaming chairs out there on the market. Get 10% off your very own gaming chair with the code Curios. Check them out at rapidx.io or at the link in the description below. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and if you don't enjoy the video, feel free to hit that dislike button too, and let's get started. So to really understand Riot's design philosophy behind the change here, the main thing to understand is really just what Riot's goals for the jungle were in Season 7. So Riot Fearless listed the three main goals that needed to be solved to make the most out of the jungle from Riot's perspective. The first is that every class and position should have what Riot calls interesting problems to solve in the early game. The second goal was to make the jungle experience a little bit more meaningful than just trying to decide where you can gank, since that favors the ganking junglers a lot more heavily compared to the others, and as a result it can make games a little bit repetitive too actually, since it ends up being a lot about who just pulls off the most good ganks in the early game. And the final goal that they have for the jungle is to make it so that it's more of a balancing act in the early game. Players should have to consider the strengths and weaknesses of their champion against the jungle if they want to be able to actively gank lanes. It shouldn't just be a free ride, where champions like Lee Sin can easily clear the jungle, spend all day ganking, and every jungle champion should be able to affect the game differently, thanks to factors like how healthily they can clear the jungle, how much they need to farm for experience, and how much farm they are willing to sacrifice to be able to pressure the lanes too. So let's talk about Smite Rewards and tie them into those goals, since that's probably the easiest way to explain why they weren't exactly working as Riot intended in Season 6. Now, they were originally designed to give junglers a way to survive in the jungle after it was made a lot more difficult, but Riot didn't want laners to be able to abuse the power of the jungle rewards themselves. The assumption here was that having different Smite rewards would give Riot a good way to balance different junglers against the challenges they may be faced. But when the Smite buffs released, they quickly became pretty divisive actually. Some champions could just abuse the buffs to just an insane level and became a lot stronger in the jungle as a result, while quite a few other champions were left behind, so to say. That meant Riot then had to start weakening the jungle camps and the Smite rewards themselves, otherwise the junglers that could abuse the bonuses would just be the only ones usable in the new meta. Nerfing the Smite rewards came with one severe drawback though. Smite rewards were fun because they were pretty impactful, and the less important they were rendered, the less fun they were for the players that were using them. The Smite reward system was designed to be a kind of like a work in progress that Riot could change maybe, like testing out different buff types so that they could tweak and improve the system in-game over time in order to potentially, or at least ideally, keep multiple types of junglers viable, from power farming tanks to early gank powerhouse champions. Actually, the Smite buffs initially were inherently limited because they couldn't really be too strong without forcing a stale meta, so the amount of design space that Riot actually had with the Smite buffs, at least on paper, was a lot lower than you might expect. It was also discovered that the proper usage of the buffs wasn't exactly happening at the time. The pro players, for example, might know when to take exactly which buff at a certain time or which one was maybe needed, and they would save their smite for the specific camp, but for the rest of the general player base, junglers would just smite as usual whenever they had it available or wanted a fast clear, and as a result, the smite buffs were just not really all that relevant overall, and they ended up becoming kind of just like a happy bonus if they just happened to be useful. Outside of the meta strategies like maybe smiting Krugs for an easier clear in your first clear only, smite buffs were just not really being utilized to a point where Riot thought that they were worth keeping around. Combine that with the fact that making them strong enough to solve issues also would cause a stale meta actually, because you get left with a system that influences more champions than others, and as a result we were left with a system that had little to no impact on the game as a whole, and it was something that, well, only the pro players with insanely good game sense and knowledge could actually take a proper benefit out of. The jungle these buffs were built into was actually pretty stable. The aim of the design was to improve the number of champions that were viable in it in the first place, but most of this was down to the jungle monster gold, down to the experience rewards, and of course the jungle items. Every time Riot tried to change the jungle, they tried to tweak the Smite rewards a little bit to maybe help fix the problems, but they were just never sufficient enough for the task at hand, so as a result, they pretty much failed in their design. Let's say, for example, that the pro players were maybe building strategies around stealing certain jungle monsters from the enemy camps in the early game. It ended up making a lot more sense from a design standpoint to change the jungle camp in question directly, rather than to change the Smite buffs to stop that play from happening in the first place. And so Riot made the decision to eventually, of course, as we all know, in Season 7, remove the Smite buffs pretty much altogether. It was held off until the preseason since they decided it would be a pretty significant change to pro play, especially the players who use them effectively, and it would also require a pretty decent rebalance of the jungle since Riot would need to find a way to make it viable for different jungle champion types to actually play in the jungle without being rendered useless, because they wouldn't have access to the stuff like the stun from Krugs, the early clear power from Gromp, stuff like that. It also gave them plenty of time to figure out ways to solve those earlier mentioned design goals without trying to force a solution using the underwhelming Smite buff system. Now, Riot's pretty confident that they've actually sort of achieved that now by introducing a few different things to consider in the jungle that should help them achieve those goals while still keeping champion diversity high. One of the big ones here is what Riot refers to as route differentiation. So Riot is hoping that the changes to jungle camps will make it so that different champions will take different routes in the jungle, while also giving them a way to specifically target, those niche strategies, or maybe the champions that are a little bit too weak, or at the same time a little bit too strong. Previously, jungling was just about whether you had to use spells or auto attacks for clearing. Now it's going to be more about which camps you can tank, which you can clear quickly, which ones you can maybe clear a bit slower, that kind of thing, which means that specific junglers are going to shine in different ways, and players can learn how to optimize their jungle route and know their limits if they want to have enough health to pull off ganks. If any particular jungler needs help with their clear, Riot can fix that issue by making sure they have the strength that they need to deal with specific jungle camps, and that way they don't affect the rest of the jungle champions like they could if they were making the change to Smite buffs. The next point Riot has also considered for the new jungle from a design standpoint is what they call jungle uptime, which is essentially just how long junglers can sustain and stick around farming the jungle before they actually have to back. Originally, most of this came from smiting red buff, which was a really powerful tool since it meant you could smite it, gain enough health to gank a lane, while also still having an awesome buff for ganking too, with it since of course the red buff is just really awesome for ganks, and this example is why Riot decided to move some of the health return onto Smite in general. It gives players a way to sustain in the jungle without feeling like they have to find a specific camp to use it on or wait for that specific scenario, and it sticks around as kind of like a fun little trick that junglers can use while dueling in the jungle. Since let's be honest, it's actually pretty cool when a 1v1 happens in the jungle, maybe one of the junglers smites the red buff to stay alive and wins the fight, stuff like that. All sorts of tricks can happen there, and with the health return on Smite being regardless of whichever camp you use it on, this trick is something that happens, of course, a lot more often. The last thing that Riot is offering as a consolation to players that will miss the Smite rewards are the new vision tools. So originally both the Raptor and Wolf Smites were used to gain or deny vision. In fact, they were probably the most properly used out of all the Smite buffs, and Riot's aware that removing these tools means that junglers will have less access to vision control, so they're making sure they bake the new tools into the game somewhere. For assassins, maybe it's going to be stuff like the new Duskblade passive that causes a blackout and disables wards when they're spotted by a ward, and it also includes stuff like the new Scryer's Bloom plants and control wards that should allow for some nice level of objective control. Overall, it does seem like Riot are definitely more aware of the issues and specific mechanics than the players are, at least in their design, so it's natural that some sort of changes might actually come as a surprise to a lot of players. It's definitely reassuring to know that they have plans in place to make up for the loss of Smite buffs in general, and they definitely want to keep the jungle as diverse as possible, and they aim to do that through their design, really. And overall, it's looking like the changes to the jungle in Season 7 turned out to be pretty solid for the most part, and I'm definitely excited to see what Riot decides to do in the future with it, and how they plan on making the jungle diverse for the overall meta of Season 7, especially for solo queue in particular. Either way though, that's just about going to wrap things up for today's video on the Smite rewards. I guess maybe it's a little bit too soon to tell if the new jungle will promote diversity enough to match the last season, but at least Riot's going to be able to make more direct changes to jungle camps and champions to try and keep as many junglers in the meta as possible. Either way though, looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.